This is Another Damn Podcast about digital asset management. I'm Henrik de Geer. Today I'm speaking with Douglas Hegley. Douglas, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Douglas, how are you involved with digital asset management?
Currently, I sit at the executive leadership level in a major fine art museum in the Twin Cities. So I would be the ultimate decision maker. The digital asset management systems would be operated underneath my responsibility.
And Douglas, how does a fine art museum use digital asset management?
So what's interesting, I think, what might be a misnomer for some people, the digital asset management in an art museum is actually a business driver like it is in any business. Art museums have art objects. Those objects themselves have data records for them, and those are kept in a different system.
Fair.
But we do need a digital asset management system for keeping photographs of those objects, and often there would be many of those. Various angles, raking light, sometimes X-ray, other spectrometer, those kinds of things. As well as images of people and parties and the history of the institution. It kind of goes on and on and on. I would say at this point that museums are still sticking mostly with still images in terms of digital asset management. We haven't, I think, fully embraced media asset management. We're producing videos, and that production is accelerating.
Fair.
I don't think we've really faced some of the struggles we're going to have similar to the ones we had in digital photography 5 or 10 years ago.
Good point. What are the biggest challenges and successes with digital asset management?
I think there are many. One of the biggest challenges for us as an industry is that our metadata models are not mature.
Good point.
So there are many different standards for the way that you would record what is in that picture.
Yeah.
Right? So the built-in metadata is easy enough.
True.
You know, date and file sizes and everything else. For us, since it's often object-centric photography, so we've taken that three-dimensional sculpture, taken it to the photo studio, lighting it, shooting it. How do you attach that asset to the record that's in a different system that describes that object? We struggle with moving data back and forth, mirroring data, coming up with better methods of sort of attaching the digital assets themselves to all of the other kinds of content that we have about an art object. Then I think for us, being nonprofits, being small, being very tight funding models, affording a fancy digital asset management system is a bit of a struggle.
Fair.
And in the first foray into digital photography that museums took beginning about 10 years ago, we had a tendency to overbuy. So we would be sold very fancy digital asset management systems that could do lots and lots of wonderful things, none of which we ever took advantage of. But we kept paying the fee every year and throwing the assets in and struggling with metadata models, not really making much progress. The success, I think, is that when I worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the photo studio went digital, and within about a year they had amassed an enormous closet full of CDs. How do we go back and find those images that we shot a year ago? So if there's a success that's clear, it's in the capacity to locate, download, relocate, reshoot when necessary, the assets that are actually needed. And it's not a manual process anymore. You can have multiple users log into a system, find the image they're looking for.
Yeah. So you can more rapidly search, find, use, reuse, repurpose.
I think that was a clear business win, but I also think it's aged a little bit. That win really took place at the Met. It probably took place about 2003, 2004. I'm currently at the MIA. They had a system that's about the same age. The systems are, in essence, aging because they're becoming full of assets.
Yes.
And because the metadata model, as I mentioned before, is really not mature or specific enough, because it's really not mature or specific enough, we have issues with overflow of result sets. So people go in and they search on something like Rembrandt, and they'll get thousands of returns, many of which are placeholder records. They are old black and white study photographs. It's not clear which one I'm supposed to use for my marketing campaign. So I go and start asking my friends, and now we've sort of blown it out of the water, right? The reason to have an asset management system is so that anybody, even with a cursory knowledge of what they're looking for, should be able to come in and get what they need.
True, but once you, let's use that example of searching for Rembrandt, and then you get documents and records, and then maybe some photos of the Rembrandts that you may have. Can't you filter down to, say, paintings of from the 1,000 records, for the sake of argument?
So I think, again, when you overbuy a system, of course that functionality is there, but users need a lot of training to understand how to use it.
Yes,
it's
and
not,
add that information. In all
right,
forms, right?
Exactly. And or the only keyword on the photograph is Rembrandt. Oh, I should say the photograph on maybe 700 photographs. there isn't a really good mature metadata model. Now, maybe the photographers remember because they know that only Charles would be shooting the master image, and he shot those paintings about in 2007.
At high resolution, blah, blah, blah.
So they can go in the
lighting.
system and they can say, I only need things shot by Charles, I want them in 2007, I want only the TIFFs, and they can get there for you.
So you can, to your point, you can search for the TIFF, or you can search for the file type, meaning I don't want a doc of Rembrandt, or about the insurance record for the second argument, or the transfer record, or the purchase record, or whatever, but I want the TIFF, or the raw file, or the JPEG, or the whatever.
Although, to be clear, we're not currently in the dams that we have storing any docs.
Oh, okay, fair.
Right? It could, I
PDF
suppose.
for that
We're not
matter?
doing that. There may be a few PDFs.
Okay.
It's not really the core business case right now. The core use is still images, high res, primarily objects, secondarily events, people, activities of a museum being recorded. We also have an archive dating back 130 years, but it's a physical archive. A few of those things get digitized now and then because there's some need for them in
On an as-needed
publication
basis.
or something. Right? So some of those things in there. But, right now it's mostly just still image.
What advice would you like to share with DAM professionals and people aspiring to become DAM professionals?
It's a really good question. People aspiring to be DAM professionals. I first of all, I consider myself the world's expert on answering this question, right? I would say that in the museum arena, which is the arena I know best, museums are in need of people to come into our world and help us adapt best practices, help us understand how businesses are running in this way. One of the core differences in a way is that we're all looking at digital asset management systems as if they are at their core set up to be persistent electronic archives. We're not a for-profit vendor who is creating products for which there are seasons and catalogs and websites to be made and campaigns to be run, advertising, marketing, press, everything else. And then a year later, it's all new products. So it kind of doesn't matter what happens to the photos of the shoes from last year, right?
True.
For us, every time we take a photo, there's a number of things. First of all, it's a fine work of art.
Sure.
You've moved it from its safe storage space into a photo studio. Anytime you move something that old and that fragile, you're damaging it.
Sure.
Now, maybe it's not obvious, but you're microfractures, or you're exposing it to different atmospheric conditions, or different lighting conditions, whatever it may be. So you're actually not doing good by the artwork. And I don't mean to belabor that point because people are very professional and very careful.
Yeah, you're a specialist for that.
Accidents are almost never happen. But it's still a fact that it's a risk.
Yes,
So if we're going to do this, we're going to move this work of art into a studio, light it, shoot it, let's do it at the absolute most professional, highest resolution that we can. Let's get as many angles, let's get as many types of spectral photographs that we can manage right now so that we put that wonderful and rare and unique object back into its secure storage space and don't touch it again for years. What we're doing is we're capturing these incredible photographs, but we're amateur in then what we do next. So of a very professional production process, followed by a very amateur sort of archival metadata process.
But so does the workflow fall off? Is that your point?
Workflow falls off a little bit.
Fair.
The folks who are doing it are probably the photographers themselves and or relatively junior people, probably not a strong metadata or library background. And I don't mean to single anyone out. There's certainly people there who are skilled.
Sure, of course.
If any of them were to leave their positions, it'd be hard to replace them. It's kind of specialist knowledge. And I think even with that specialist knowledge, what's missing then is some real world experience of having run this kind of system where it's a really rapid fire production environment.
Right. And you're embedding the information, to your point, that may be missing because most photographers don't like adding metadata to their files. There's a lot of value to finding it again if they add a lot more than just the word Rembrandt, to your point earlier.
Right. So I think you're right. There's been talk here at the Henry Stewart Dam, New York, about having workflows that would capture data that would then automatically become metadata. That's terrific. You can do there. You get sort of subject and photographer assigned and all these other kinds of things that can happen automatically. In the use cases that we're seeing, though, whether it's internal, so internal you would have content creators, writers, editors, people working with the press, marketing, whatever it may be. They don't think in those sort of more academic, scholarly ways. Like they want the hero image of Lucretia by Rembrandt, and they want to be able to get it right now because they're on the phone with someone who wants to do a story. So we need keywording in a very, I don't know,
Consistent way?
It's consistent, but it's also natural language.
Fair, yeah.
So we have keywording that says things like, acrylic on canvas.
Which
right?
you probably have a few.
Yeah, oil on canvas, oil on copper, terracotta, these kinds of things, which are very important, and they're the fact.
Yes, the medium.
But when your press agent is on the phone with a reporter from the New York Times, they don't go to the system and type in terracotta, right?
True.
They're on the phone, they're talking, they're trying to type things like clay, pot, Africa, beadwork, and they're just desperately trying to find the image. Like, I'm trying to find it for you right now, Mr. Such and such.
Yes.
And because we don't have that piece in there, it makes the system of much less use to them.
True.
So instead what they're doing is emailing somebody, like a photographer, their friend, saying, what, do you have that pot from Africa with the beads? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. And then so two people get involved in a workflow that really should just be one.
It's really tied to, in part, institutional knowledge.
Well, here's what I wonder. So because I'm not a digital asset management worker expert, it's not my training. But if you had an organization that was constantly feeding stories to the press,
Yes.
So whatever that may be, there must be folks out there who do like sports photography or something like that, right?
Yep.
So they got to be uploading these things quickly. They got to be tagging them with the kinds of words that a sports writer is going to use, like World Series Game 3.
Yes.
And you better have that, or no one's going to use your images.
True.
So we don't have that. Discipline is a weird word for it because it's kind of lightweight, but it's so absolutely necessary to make the asset findable across a much broader swath of people. And if I were to tie it back to some of the strategies that we've been talking about in the art museum world, anyway, is that we have been an industry that for 150 years has been in the kind of if you build it they will come mode. So we're great, we're fancy, everyone should come. If you're not coming, there must be something wrong with you. Right? This was the old model, the old elite model of having an art museum.
Yes.
What you're seeing art museums do in the last 10 years, maybe a little bit more, is say, no. Look, this is important. Art education being gutted in this country. Creative thinking gutted. Innovation gutted. Like you can't get this kind of stuff in school anymore. You should come to a museum. Now, that means museums need to be more engaging, more embracing of different points of view. Instead of saying to someone, welcome to the museum, you must be very proud to be here, we have to say, welcome to the museum, we're really glad you're here. How can we help you have an experience that you'll never forget?
And to your point, even with DAM, it needs to be more accessible.
Right.
Yeah. And once that's more accessible, then people can obtain it hypothetically in the virtual museum sense. I've worked with some that are doing that piecemeal, in all fairness. But so that's the future challenge, I assume, with some.
So that's the tactical implementation of a philosophical point. So let's say our PR and marketing hire a couple of young social media folks, right? And they want to throw together a Tumblr site or a Pinterest or Instagram, and they want to grab some photos from the collection. Yeah. And they go into the system, and they start saying, like, give me an exciting photo that shows women having fun. And the system doesn't have anything like that in there. It has, like, Matisse bathers, but that's not what a 28-year-old social media manager is looking for. No. Right, so I know I'm beating the horse to death here a little bit, but it's a metadata model that's less about this sort of deep, scholarly, academic information, and more about, hey guys, what exactly do we have here?
Fair, and that could be a controlled vocabulary, it could be a taxonomy, because those events, to your point earlier, happen regularly, and they're the kinds of activities that happen in the museum, because there's only so many things that will happen in the museum that are permissible.
Lot of things
they're permissible in the museum, if you will.
We're
whether it's a fundraiser or
it's funny. We're beholden to our own approach. I mean, when I worked at the Metropolitan, there were years when there were almost 20,000 events on the event calendar.
That's a lot.
In 365 days.
Fair.
Now I'm at a smaller regional museum, but the number of events still is in the thousands per year. Now that's counting things like tours and school groups coming in, but each of these things happen.
Yes.
Right? And we are slaves to our own sort of success in this way. We don't want to stop doing all of that. It's a little overwhelming. Sure. There's photography of a lot of it that nobody can find. And that's the whole point of having a DAMs really in the first place.
Well, thank you, Douglas.
Thank you.
For more on digital asset management, log on to another-damblog.com. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to email me at anotherDamblog@gmail.com. Thanks again.